Welcome back to Watch the Booker Man and to the immediate aftermath to what was a pretty underwhelming episode of WCW Nitro. To be fair, a few things didn't go in our favour and I probably made a few poor decisions as well. The only thing I've done since booking that show is open up the game and basically do a filter. I'm doing something with the cruiserweights this week on the show and I'm wanting to bring in Nicho El Millonero, better known as Psicosis, for a one-night deal, so we will just change that to a handshake agreement. Of course, no ironclad clauses in a handshake deal, and we are just bringing him in for the one appearance, covering his travel as well. This sort of serves as a tryout in a sense as to whether we think we can bring him back onto the roster full time. He certainly has the ability to be a member of our cruiserweight division, but also I am trying to give the new face to the cruiserweight division, so again I'm a little bit conflicted on that, but moreover it's because he has the popularity. I'm hoping 35 in the USA does make him somebody considered recognisable for us, and then that'll mean that we won't get that negative note on the cruiserweight match that I have planned for this week's show. But when you actually look at the popularity of the people in our unimportant list, some of them are as high as 35. It could be the case that he's still unimportant, but it gives me a better chance. I did look at other people who were a little bit more over, but none of them are available. I could bring in Juventud Guerrera, and yeah, it probably would be more of a surefire thing, but his attitude means that we're almost certainly not going to bring him in long term, so I'd rather serve two purposes with bringing in Nicho El Millonero and take the slight risk on the popularity rather than a bit more of a sure thing with Juventud, but the sure thing being that he's going to be a massive arsehole. Rey Mysterio Jr., this wouldn't be the way that I bring him back anyway, but he's still not available. Sabu, likewise, this isn't the way to bring him in. I'm not going to sign Sabu as a throwaway guy in a cruiserweight match. I do think that he will come into the company within the next 6 months, but it's going to be in a big, more prominent position. He's certainly very over, but with other things that are going on in the company at the minute, I do feel like there's a much better place to introduce him. And likewise, Ultimo Dragon is unfortunately out with a long-term injury. With all that said, I will now go through process towards next Wednesday because there's nobody else that I want to bring in, and we'll see if anything happens between now and that show. And we will now confirm the signing of Nicho El Millonero. Shall we apply his alter ego? We might as well, because that is his name in WCW, and we are just a day from Nitro now, so I might as well stay with you, and if nothing happens then we'll go straight into this week's episode. And yeah, we will now go into this week's Nitro. Again, nobody's getting the night off. I don't want to keep doing the same venue, so what should we go for? Have we hit Mid-South yet? We'll go to Mid-South and we'll pick the best option. The Ector County Coliseum is the venue for tonight's show. No pre-show incidents, thankfully. We've got some stored creative ideas, I think, but I've got a couple of storylines that I'm not that happy with, so I'm going to go for a storyline idea. Bit of a gamble, so maybe use that on a mid-card one. I do want to use a creative finish as well because, again, likely to succeed, so our main event should do better than expected with that. And then with 85 left, how about we go for an angle idea? Lance Storm, likely to succeed. We know how that went last time, and we'll do a character idea, and if it's a good one, I was going to try and use this on Hugh Morrus to try and cheer him up, but I'm probably not going to take a risk of pissing him off further. That is our creative energy used basically for the night, so we will look into the locker room incidents. Buff Bagwell being a bit of an arse backstage. There's a surprise. Kanyon, and so everybody's kicking off with a morale officer tonight. I don't know why people are doing that, but it is what it is. Torrie Wilson redressing the balance there by having a classic rib pulled on Stacy Keibler, and everybody laughed about that. Jimmy Yang, I love this guy, the best guy to have backstage, irrepressible, he's currently pleased, and his power ballads apparently stole the show. Perhaps the Flying Elvises could be something that comes to a WCW screen. Fit Finlay ran the pre-show training drills, RVD and Big Vito butting heads, so just nobody likes each other. The relaxed Rob Van Dam butting heads with Big Vito on his first night back in the company says a lot about the situation. Oh, I'm so bored of these locker room incidents every week. It's too many clicks for me, and I'm not going to bother addressing the locker room. We do actually have some matches pre-booked. I just forgot to put them into the show, but I will now come and book this episode of Nitro, and I've actually decided this week I'm going to do things a little bit differently. You can see we still have 90 minutes of the show to book, and the way I'm going to do it tonight is that I'm going to go through my booking process. Somebody put a comment asking if I could go through this, and I feel like this is a good show to do that for now. Sometimes I will book a show just completely in the game, so I'll take this right now and start from scratch. Usually though, I will make notes whether in an actual notebook or on Google Drive. So currently I have got the Google Drive notes for this week's show on my laptop screen, while this monitor will be where I'm booking the show. But to me, the two most important screens when putting a new show together is to look at the storylines, just so you can get a quick overview of everything that you need to advance throughout the week. And I've not always been somebody who keeps on top of the storyline screen, but it's something that within the last couple of years I've always made sure to do, so that you can just get a quick look at what you do need to advance on every show. And if you're not advancing it, then why aren't you advancing it? There has to be a reason for something to miss a week. It's fine that not every storyline gets advanced every week, but it's nice to try and give a reason for why it's not going to be the case. The other one is to look at the show history. Usually maybe when I'm sort of 3/4 of the way through booking the show, I know what my main event's going to be, but there's still a little bit of time to fill, and that's when I'll sort of go through everything that I've got on last week's show and just say, have we followed that up? And usually I will find that pretty much everything has been followed up. I'm going to do that tonight as well, so we'll see as I go through the show exactly what I mean by that. I suppose the drawback of that is that sometimes if there's people who are lost in the shuffle, it's hard for them to find a way back into storyline, but that is something that I also do. As you've seen in previous episodes, I will always look at who's on the booking analysis screen as not being used, so that's sort of the background into how I book. But when it comes to booking a show, and I say this whether I have notes or whether I don't have notes, I come into it with an idea of what I want to have on the show, but I always book forward. There's sort of two schools of thought of this, that you either book the main event and work backwards, but I always think it's better to have an idea in your mind of course of what your main event's going to be, but book the show in chronological order. And I find that for me personally, that gives the episode a better flow kind of thing. Whether people agree with that or not is another thing, but that's always how I've seen it, and I think you can plant seeds for stuff better if you're working forward rather than going backward and trying to force them in there. And funnily enough, it's taken 4 weeks, but this is actually the first episode of Nitro where we are beginning with an in-ring segment, but it follows again something that I often like to do, which is that I think that the next show should oftentimes, not always, sometimes there's bigger stories that you need to start with, but a lot of the time I think if you've ended on a certain thing, the thing that people are tuning in to see the next week is the follow-up to that. So last week was obviously the Booker T, DDP, Buff Bagwell, Harris Brothers storyline, so I'm going to do an in-ring segment that follows that up and sets up our main event for tonight's show. Now, this is one of the screens that has changed massively since TEW 2020. As long as I've played TEW, the angle screen has been very, very similar. Now it has changed quite dramatically. I'm just going to look, as I said, to my notes here as I book this segment, and I'll probably cut out a lot of the typing just to save time, because I don't think you actually want to see a minute by minute, second by second booking of this show, because it can often take me 2 or 3 sittings to do that. So the first part of the angle is in now. It's Booker T walking to the ring and cutting a promo where he basically challenges the Harris Brothers to come out and fight him. He was disgusted by the actions of Buff Bagwell, and I'm just going to give that 3 minutes, 1 minute for him to do his entrance, maybe another minute for the commentators to do a little bit of catching up, and then we will follow up of course with the next part of the angle. But I think this is fair to say it's a serious segment, and it's based on Booker T cutting a promo, Buff Bagwell off screen, as is Don and Ron Harris. We will save the details to that and add a copy of part 1 as the second part of the segment. And I've realised this is a pretty complicated segment that I'm booking to open the show, but instead of the Harris Brothers, Diamond Dallas Page comes out. He too is very angry about what happened last week, feeling it should be him and Booker T competing for the World Heavyweight title in the next championship match. However, they will share the ring tonight as they face the Harris Brothers in the main event. So the only thing that I need to change there in part 2 is that we give Diamond Dallas Page a speaking role, and I think we'll just go 2 minutes for that, so it brings us up to 5 minutes, and then we'll have coming out from the back, Buff Bagwell basically comes out and mocks the two men. When they challenge him to come to the ring and basically back up his words, Buff scurries off to the back. And that's just going to be 1 minute, and the only change again is Buff Bagwell being changed from off screen to cutting a promo. When Booker T and Diamond Dallas Page follow, it's revealed that this was a setup. The two men are jumped by the Harris Brothers, and they eventually have to be pulled apart. And this for part 3, which is also going to just be, we'll say, 2 minutes. And we're just going to change Don Harris to fighting, Ron Harris to fighting, Booker T to fighting, and Diamond Dallas Page to fighting. So while it is an attack, it's more a case of them just brawling in the back rather than actually one side taking down the other. And then storming onto the scene, a furious Shane McMahon chastises Buff Bagwell. The smug #1 contender is not happy as he is sent straight back out to the ring. If Buff Bagwell wants to stir up violence, then he can head straight back to the ring and compete in our opening match. And for that last part, just to keep it tidy really, I'm going to take everybody else out and just have it Buff Bagwell and Shane McMahon. So advancing our main event storyline with an 8-minute segment. Now initially I'd put this as 9 minutes in my notes, so I will just add an extra minute to the part with Shane Shane and Buff Bagwell. And obviously when it's a segment so packed as that, I think that's the benefit of now being able to do up to 5 parts in an angle, but at the same time it does make it pretty difficult to fit everything into that little segment name box. And we will actually script that just because there's so many moving parts. I'm a little bit worried that if one person struggles off script, it will throw the entire segment off. Now, I don't tend to even look at this staff screen, but yeah, I'm happy with Johnny Ace to be the road agent for this segment. The only time I'll change anything like that is if I ever get a note saying that somebody like a referee or a road agent is being overworked on the night. And again, I'll use these when they are relevant, but I don't really see a reason to do so, and we've got that's a bit of a gamble. You know what, just because I'm going through my booking method, I will use it on this just to see whether it works or whether it doesn't. But that is the first segment booked, and you will notice throughout this I save so many times. Pretty much every time I book a segment, I will then save to make sure that we don't lose anything as we do it. And just to add some context to the booking process, I have, having booked that one segment, just gone and treated myself to a snack and a drink. So just a little bit of behind the curtain. So I've no clue how this video might come together. It could be over the course of a few days, hopefully not, but you know, if you've followed the channel for a long time, you do know that that was a 10-minute break. It can be a 6-month break between me opening up TEW and booking a show, so let's hope with this series that's not going to be the case. I will now hopefully get to book a few things here in a row without much interruption, and of course, as we established in the previous segment, it's Buff Bagwell heading straight back out to the ring for the opening match, and he will face the angry man Hugh Morrus. And now the booking to this match has actually changed from when I made my notes. So on the notes we get Hugh is absolutely furious, and for much of the 6 minutes of the match, because he's so angry, he's just beating on Buff Bagwell. Then he gets low blowed and hit with the blockbuster, and it was just going to be there for a good win for Buff Bagwell to establish him towards his World Heavyweight Championship match, putting him over as the heel that he is. And then of course Hugh Morrus, because he's sort of in that Extreme Outsiders storyline, it's his anger and frustration that's actually caused him to not probably have his eye on the ball like he did. I kind of changed that now. I'm still undecided fully on the booking here. I'm going to do Victor Buff Bagwell. That's definitely not changing, because even though I kind of think it'd be funny to his storyline, I do think we need him winning going into that match with Booker T. I'm going to go Wild Brawl because that's just what I want it to be from the start. Straight from the beginning of the match, we just need Hugh Morrus to be laying into Buff Bagwell, and I think that's the one that best puts that across. And then I'm looking for, you could even put Dominate for Hugh Morrus, because I really do want it to be that one-sided, but I'm not going to do that. We want a Rage DQ finish, I'm changing it to, and it's just a case of us putting over Hugh Morrus. The laughing man is now the angry man. He is not happy at all, and he's just taking his frustration out, and it happens to be Buff Bagwell that is the first man who shares a ring with him. Now this is where I'm unsure still, so I was thinking about having a distraction where Tommy Dreamer and Hack are seen coming through the crowd, and then that's kind of what causes Hugh Morrus to flip. Now I think we can actually do that whereby the commentators are telling that story that Hugh Morrus is so angry that we don't need the visual appearance of Hack and Dreamer. It just feels a bit cliche to me to have that, oh, they appear in the crowd and that's what caused him to snap. I don't necessarily think we need that, so I'm just going to make it so that Hugh Morrus, as Buff Bagwell, is annoying enough as well. The way Buff Bagwell wrestles, probably pulling his hair, poking his eyes, maybe even attempted a low blow, that's where Hugh Morrus just completely loses it. And of course there's the parallel there that in the last couple of weeks Hack and Dreamer have shown no regard for the rules and got themselves intentionally DQ'd, and in getting in Hugh Morris's head they've kind of turned him into somebody who himself gets disqualified. So that kind of keeps the thread going as well, without sort of hitting you over the head with the idea of, oh, here's Dreamer and Hack, and that's why Hugh Morrus has done what he did. So that is the first match booked, and we'll just put in a post-match celebration for Buff Bagwell. I don't necessarily think these are needed after every single match, but I just like to do it so that we can put a little summary of what's happened in there in case I forget when going through the show. So Buff Bagwell stands tall. The commentators put over what has been a tough time for Hugh Morrus. He'll be watching tonight as the Extreme Outsiders. Now that's not an official name from, that's what they're being referred to. Dreamer and Hack aren't calling themselves the Extreme Outsiders, but that's what the commentators are referring to them as, versus the Peaks of Perfection in a no DQ match. And that just gives us the opportunity to hype what's coming later tonight. Buff Bagwell himself will have his eye on tonight's main event as he signals around his waist that the World Heavyweight Championship is coming to him. So a very, very simple segment there. And again, I'm not really sure how to do these post-match segments in the new game. I don't think it's anything other than just a generic segment, to be fair, and it's going to be Buff Bagwell based on working the crowd, and we're going to do it scripted because I think working the crowd is actually technically in the game as a verbal thing of them speaking to the audience. That's not really what I want, but Buff Bagwell stands tall, Hugh Morrus having a tough time, Bagwell wants the title. So pretty simple, nothing too interesting there. But I do like the way that first 18 minutes of the show comes together, going straight from the opening segment into the opening match, and then even in the post-match we're putting across 2 other things that are going to happen on tonight's show. So it does, again, the benefit of booking forward is that you sort of can work in what's going to come up on the rest of the show and hopefully build that hype towards the end of the episode. And now I'm going to be honest, at this point, I'm not sure how much I'm actually enjoying booking the show this way and talking through it. I think that it's probably taking more time, it's making for a less interesting show, and I don't really think there's anything necessarily that I'm going to need to talk you through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to book through the rest of the show, and if there's anything that I sort of notice that I think, oh, that's something that I do that might be interesting to people, then I'll come back to it. If not, I'll just come back to the show and we'll run through it as we normally do. I know somebody did ask me to go through my entire booking process, but that is basically how I do it. And if there's anything where I'm not sure or I'm going against my notes, whatever it is, I will come back to it, and then you'll get sort of a piece of the show before and a piece of the show after. So just briefly, I will also show how I book backstage segments. We've got the description in there, which I will go through when I run through the show after. But here we just have a backstage segment where it's Billy Kidman and Rob Van Dam talking before they are interrupted by Chris Kanyon and Jason Jett. So we've got the 1 minute part here, backstage, angle, live and character development, and we're just rating it on Billy Kidman and Rob Van Dam working the crowd, and it is scripted. We'll save the details for that, we'll add a copy of that, and then this is where Kanyon comes in, and we're just going to do him cutting a promo and Jason Jett cutting a promo. Now this one, instead of being character development, I would say is storyline development, so we'll save the details of that, and there we have our 2 minute segment. Now I'm not sure, again, this is something that I think is a little bit open to interpretation, what people think of when they say, is it character development that we rate it on? I don't actually know what the ratings of that are or how it would affect the angle, so I just tried to keep it to a simple cutting a promo because, well, it's not necessarily going out there and cutting a promo. It is what I think I would have previously used in other games as something like entertainment, so I'm sort of stuck in my way. So if people think that actually I'd be better off using dramatic acting or character development or anything, again, please let me know, because I'm pretty new to this game. I've only booked the 5 shows that you've seen me book on screen. That's just how I do a backstage segment. Again, there's nothing major, there's no massive things. I will see if there's any angle ideas. Do we just use that? I'm going to stick without using that for now, advancing the storyline, and I will actually in part 1 include Lance Storm and Mike Awesome as off-screen people, just so that it does play into the fact that we are focusing on that match later, which is of course part of a storyline that we already have established. So I'm back again with the next segment here, so I might as well have just gone through the whole thing, it looks like. But another benefit of actually writing notes on a separate piece of paper or on Google Drive before actually putting it into the game, you can then, as you're going through the show, put a few little bits of foreshadowing in there. So for example, I've put as the final line of this segment, it's not even relevant to what's happened before, so don't need to focus on that too much, but a motorcycle pulls up in the parking lot and the commentators wonder if anybody has ordered pizza tonight. Now when we get to the segment where that pays off, you'll see why just putting that little thing in there does add to that moment when we come round to it. And if I'd have just booked in game, it's something where I probably wouldn't have gone back and added that in, but because I've got the notes to one side, I can actually sort of put the pieces together as I go through booking the show. So I would say that I do enjoy booking the show from start to finish in game, and I do like writing the show from start to finish when I do make notes. But the benefit of having both is that you can then sort of put things back together and thread more interesting details into segments where you have the opportunity to do so. And just as I'm booking at the halfway point now, I have just been thinking about the add angle screen in this game compared to previous versions, and it was actually the main thing that held me off buying TW9 for about a year. It took me a long time to make the jump from TW 2020. I do really like how it gives you the option to have an overall angle that actually has multiple parts. Like this segment now, I might have previously done the first part of it separate to the second part and had 2 different angles, and that meant that your booking screen got pretty cluttered up pretty quickly if you wanted to have a lot of backstage stuff going on, whereas this allows me to put it all into one angle. And while again, like I say, the segment name descriptors does suffer from this, it does mean that you can have a more compact show, and just it sort of encourages booking things again in a way that flows a little bit better rather than having everything in chopped up little different segments, or at least that's how it works in my mind. Another thing that I almost always do as well is book shows in 2 halves, and it's a really strange thing because it's not even a case of booking 2 hours in this show. This is a 90-minute show, so realistically I should probably book an hour and then a 30 minutes, and because I'm so used to doing 2-hour shows, I always book the show in 2 halves regardless of how long it is. So as you can see here now, I'll probably take another little break here 45 minutes into the show and get back to booking the next half after I've made myself a cup of tea. So the plan was to open the second hour of the show with that match that would have featured Psicosis, the first of 2 3-way matches which will crown 2 number 1 contenders to challenge Shane Helms for the Cruiserweight Championship in a 3-way in a few weeks time at that event that Shane McMahon is yet to announce. But I looked into Recognisable, there was no sign of Psicosis. He's certainly not made it to the well-known screen, which does mean that Psicosis, like many of the cruiserweights, is considered unimportant, and that means basically the match is going to suck whatever we do. Now this makes me think 2 things. One, that we were probably a little bit hasty in kicking Billy Kidman and Chavo Guerrero out of the division. I think we could have done a little bit more with them and maybe had them both leave the division in 3 months or 6 months when we had built up some other names, but unfortunately I've done it and there's nothing I can do about it, which means that this match is just going to be a stinker, despite the fact that it'll probably be a really good match if you actually imagine the 3 guys in the match facing off with each other. And I'm going to say as Elix Skipper versus Jimmy Yang versus Super Crazy, and we're going to send them out there for 8 minutes to have a high spots rated match. It is going to be won by Super Crazy, who is going to pin Elix Skipper, whose words from the last week obviously haven't quite been backed up here, but we're going to do a high spots match with a pinfall finish. But at ringside we are going to have Kid Romeo, the partner of Elix Skipper, we're going to have Kaz Hayashi, the partner of Jimmy Yang, and we're going to have Yoshihiro Tajiri, the partner of Super Crazy. And it's going to be the case of when those 2 heels, Kid Romeo and Kaz Hayashi, try and get involved, Yoshihiro Tajiri is able to fight them off, and it will be Tajiri and those 2, unless I change my mind on one of those and maybe even use Psicosis as the 3rd man in the other match on next week's show. But more likely I'm going to use Psicosis in a sort of traditional tryout way, in that I'm going to put him in a match on the pre-show and see how he performs. If he does well, then we may sign him, but because he wasn't actually any more useful in terms of being a recognisable name than any of the other guys on the roster, I'd rather give somebody already in our Cruiserweight division that opportunity in the match rather than Psicosis. Maybe I should have brought Juventud Guerrera in. Maybe I can do that next week and he will give us that lift that'll stop it from being like a 25 rating match or something. And as you can see here, we've put together a bit of a naff main event, to be fair. Obviously it serves the purpose of just putting over Booker T and Diamond Dallas Page in a dominant victory, but I am quite concerned that it's not going to get that good of a rating given what we've seen from Diamond Dallas Page so far. I think Booker T can only do so much of a carry job in this, but what I will do is deploy a creative finish that is a safe bet, so pretty much no chance of that failing, I don't think, and hopefully that can boost the overall match rating. And well, considering we were only 3 points above the minimum last week, I'm hoping that this can keep us above 65 at least, which is not really a high standard to be setting for our show, but that's where we are at the minute, with not that many big matches that we can put on, given that we're trying to build to a big show in a few weeks' time. As I've shown before, with the main show now booked, the 90 minutes all put together, we have 54% matches, so we're not going to be penalised from our expected 40%. Now, to actually book a show with only 40% matches is very, very difficult, because I've been trying to do short matches and angle-heavy shows, and it's still at 55%. One thing I don't actually like is that the wrestling time includes entrances. I think it should be a percentage based on the actual in-ring action and not including entrances and things like that, or the non-wrestling time that's included in the matches. One thing that I think is a little bit of an oversight, but we do see here the people who aren't being used on the show, and this will be where I'll put together the pre-show matches, just so that everybody's there. We're not giving people the night off. They're getting paid mostly on monthly agreements, so it's in our best interest to use them and to just see if we can find any interesting chemistry, or to see them improving the ring or whatever, just by using Steve Corino in pre-show matches. We have got him up from unimportant to recognisable, so that's something that I'm going to keep doing. I don't know if it's his outside work that's got him to that point, but something to keep track of and see if it does have any effect. So I'll put together maybe 3 or 4 matches here, and then I'll come back with Nitro. You'll also see that Ronald and Donald Harris are being used too much on this show. That's absolutely fair, and this is probably their final appearance or second final appearance in WCW, so if it gives them a knock to their popularity or momentum, I'm not really all that bothered. But yeah, I'll be back on the other side. So we begin with the pre-show where Evan Courageous defeats Jamie Noble, Psicosis, who we just used in a pre-show tryout match rather than actually booking him in the Cruiserweight match, as I said, and Shannon Moore in 7 minutes and 12 when Evan Courageous pinned Jamie Noble with a corkscrew senton bomb, obviously built around high spots. Jamie Noble the weak link, Psicosis the best of the bunch, and while they're all classed as unimportant, I do think that obviously somebody who can put in a performance like that at this level could be a vital part of the Cruiserweight division. It's whether people think, is he somebody to bring back, or do people prefer the idea of going with the fresh direction, the new faces for the WCW Cruiserweight division, which, let's face it, in maybe a year or two, is more likely to resemble the TNA X division than the Cruiserweight division of old. So it's whether bringing back an old face might be his USP in the division, or whether you think it might be better that we stick with our own new guys and perhaps even bring in a luchador from Mexico who hasn't featured on American television before. Again, completely open. Essa Rios would have been an interesting choice for that, even though he has been in the WWF, but unfortunately he stayed with the World Wrestling Federation. We then go into the second match of the pre-show, which sees Steve Corino pick up another win of 57, so he is putting in some good performances, even as somebody who's not that over and in short matches. And we have him debut a finisher here, a figure for leg lock. We wanted to test that out, and I did want to give him a submission finisher, as he currently only has pinfall finishers in the game. And then we have the return of Big Vito. His FBI gimmick gets a great, which I'm very, very happy to see, and he performs at a 43. Johnny the Bull also at a 43, and they defeat Mike Sanders and Reno. Just because it's a pre-show match, I thought we'd get the crowd up by having the baby faces win. We've got an expectant crowd going into the beginning of Nitro, which kicks off with that segment that I mentioned earlier. I've been through this. I will just show the full text in case anybody skipped through to this part of the show, and you can just read through that. Ends with Buff Bagwell being sent back to the ring by Shane McMahon, and it's an 85 for the opening part of the segment, which is obviously just Booker T's promo, but it shows how much he's carrying things because there are other things where other people get involved, particularly the Harris brothers, drag it down. But we do advance our World Heavyweight Championship storyline to start the show. As I said, I like to kick off with what ended last week's show where I can, and the angle idea was a success, so happy with that. And green notes is always good to see. A red note here for Buff Bagwell, once again being in extremely poor form. He gets a 56, which somebody who's going to be main eventing in a World Heavyweight title match is pretty bad, to be fair. And Hugh Morrus with a 54, but we explained again it was the attacking rage that Hugh Morrus got into, and then after the match we have him standing tall. But a 69 for Buff Bagwell shows that he's not all bad, it's just that he's pretty crap in the ring, I think, isn't it? So again, another segment that I think I went through before, gets a 46, losing heat to two storylines, so it's not very good, probably for the fact that, again, Billy Kidman's not the best on the mic, and Jason Jett's in there as well. But it just is the segment where Billy Kidman and Rob Van Dam talk about facing Team Canada and potentially could it be a US title match down the line. RVD tells Billy that he's getting ahead of himself. Kanyon comes in. Jason Jett basically puts over Rob Van Dam, which pisses Kanyon off. The two then leave, and we hear Kanyon yelling at Jason Jett. So it's not a great segment, and it loses heat to two storylines before a pretty big match in this storyline. So a little bit disappointing there. We then get a promo from Hugh Morrus, who is in the parking lot, and he lets out a sadistic laugh before addressing the cameras. Hugh says that he isn't laughing because any of this is funny. He's laughing because he just doesn't know what to do with all this anger that's inside him. He gives the Extreme Outsiders credit. They're in his head. They've got him acting like he's one of them. They saw that earlier when he got disqualified against Buff Bagwell. He knows that Dreamer and Hack are going to pulverise those two rookies on live television tonight, and that beating is going to be on the head of Shane McMahon. But if they want to play by extreme rules, then Hugh Morrus is more than happy to play next week. No BS, no backup, and absolutely no rules. Either one of them, Hack or Dreamer versus Hugh Morrus, anything goes. As Hugh Morrus storms off, a motorcyclist pulls up in the parking lot, and the commentators question, has anybody ordered pizza tonight? And like I said previously, this is just a little foreshadowing of something that's coming next, but another 1 minute segment that does lose heat to our storyline. So I'm going to keep booking in this way because I do think that having a lot of angles and stuff like that between matches is important to make for an entertaining weekly show. It probably means that our storylines aren't as hot as I could have them, but again, I don't really care too much about that. I'm just hoping that overall and over time we can get to a position where things are a little bit better. Devon Storm then cuts a promo in the ring, and he puts over just how good the man they call Vader is. Again, he's a student of the game, so he's been watching tapes all week to see what is coming, what we're preparing for here. He intends to make his own mark on WCW history in this new era. he was the first man willing to step up and fight Vader, so bring it on. So there's not even much of an expectation from Devon Storm here that he's going to last that long or beat Vader, but it's just the idea that he was the one who was willing to get involved, and it's a poor match again. I thought Devon might be able to guide Vader to a bit of a better match, and we sort of put over here that he does well to last 4 minutes. The other guys have lasted 1 minute, 2 minutes, so he's lasted double the time, and he does get some offense in, and he's resilient, but ultimately Vader with a 53 keeps him down, Devon Storm with a 45, and I said this last week, and I'd sort of already planned a lot of this week's show when I was going through last week's show, but we do need to improve the in-ring product where we can, or at least maybe even cut a few matches where we're getting these sort of ratings and turn them into segments. I'm not really sure, but there's something that I've noticed again that I will show you after the show, in the, not to be too negative, but things aren't necessarily going in the right direction. Now, maybe being impatient in this regard because it's only been a month, but when I show you, maybe it'll make a bit more sense. Vader then stands tall in the ring with the commentators putting over a plucky, resilient display from Devon Storm, but it simply was not enough to get the job done against the man they call Vader. He is a super heavyweight in a company that doesn't have too many big guys, so he should hopefully be standing out. And as Jimmy Hart joins him in the ring, he puts over the size, the strength, the power of this man, and he is a problem for the WCW roster. Shane McMahon is then shown speaking with Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire, their usual back and forth rapport, saying that there's been a few tag team matches booked tonight, so he's given, from an in-ring perspective, the night off to Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo, given that they are in action tonight. Shane wonders how the champs would feel about potentially facing the Extreme Outsiders in the future if they get through their match with Mike Jindrak and Shawn Stasiak tonight. Natural Born Thrillers don't fancy their former partners and friends' chances against Dream and Hack, but say that if it does come down to it, then they'll be ready for a fight. They have no qualms with stooping down to the level of Tommy Dreamer and Sandman if that's what it takes. Hack, walking into the office, a man in a helmet walks in with a few boxes of pizza. He asks the three men if they ordered anything. They did not, so again, just a little tease there, and basically I've given it away because obviously Johnny the Bull, who is under the helmet, has a speaking role in this, and it's just a little follow-up on the thing that happened a couple of weeks ago with Lance Storm throwing the pizza in the bin. It's then going to come back and blow up in his face, but we'll get into that in the next match. I think it is. Chuck, Sean and Shane sort of laugh this off. What a strange thing to have happened. A pizza delivery guy coming into Shane McMahon's office. During a brief segment in the back, Booker T and DDP are shown strategizing for their match in tonight's main event against Ron and Don Harris. Now, I'm already thinking that we might be in trouble here in terms of the ratings of this show. There's a chance this could be a bit of a wake-up call for me. Hopefully the segments on the show do lift us up. This is a decent segment. Walking past the locker room of Booker T and Diamond Dallas Page, however, on their way to their match, Lance Storm and Mike Awesome pop their head into the room. Lance wishes the men good luck tonight, but says that Booker had better watch his back in future, even when the Harris brothers are the ones right in front of him. So perhaps a bit of a warning there, or is it them saying that they maybe had something to do with the attack on Booker T last week? They walk on, Booker's confused, and the commentators basically put that point across, because I don't think it's necessarily that obvious what I was getting at there, so we do want the commentators to try and hammer home. Are they suggesting that they had something to do with the attack on Booker T last week, which everybody had assumed was the Harris brothers, but we didn't really have any evidence for that? So advancing the World Heavyweight Championship storyline with that, and then we do get a good match, to be fair, good wrestling and decent reaction from the crowd. The United States Championship storyline has advanced with this segment and gained heat, as has the Generation of Innovation. We do see RVD off his game, so only a 71 for him. Lance Storm, the MVP of tonight's match and potentially tonight's show, to be fair. Booker T might be somewhere similar to that, actually, to be fair, but green notes will rub him down nonetheless and getting the crowd buzzing, because we did say it to steal the show, but it's a bit of a crazy booked match. Kanyon comes out, and this is where the pizza guy comes out on his motorbike when the referee's distracted, and some sort of shenanigans of it being thrown in Lance Storm or Mike Awesome's face. We then get RVD taking a crazy dive into the guardrails or the crowd to take Mike Awesome out, and while Lance does try and take advantage of this by throwing RVD back in the ring, he does overcome it and hits the 5-star frog splash. What Rob Van Dam didn't see, but that the referee thankfully did, is that Billy Kidman had stolen a tag at this time and hits the shooting star press, and it is Billy Kidman who pins Lance Storm. RVD may well have done the legwork there, but Billy Kidman holds a pinfall victory over the United States champion, and that will be important going forward. So it's a bit of an overbooked match. The reason for that is that we wanted Lance Storm however we could to be protected. So there is the one part of Johnny the Bull sort of outsmarting him and getting a little bit of a pop for him, hopefully. But also, Mike Awesome was taken out of contention, and then it was a 2-on-1 situation. 2 finishers were used to give Lance Storm his first pinfall defeat since the start of the save. Now, I was sceptical on whether I wanted to protect Lance a bit more than this and have him go on a bit of a better undefeated streak for when he does eventually lose the US title. It's a bit more meaningful because he's beat everybody. But I just think with this being that upper mid-card storyline, I think it's okay for people to trade wins a little bit. And Billy Kidman, who's had somewhat of a slow start, being a bit of a side character to Rob Van Dam and losing a couple of matches, it's a good way to give him a big win without taking anything away from the person he beats. Now, RVD is obviously furious at Billy Kidman for stealing the tag and for gaining the important fall, but Billy insists that gaining the victory is the most important thing and nothing else. Now, we all know that having a pinfall over the champion on the record books does give you somewhat of an advantage, and Billy Kidman signals around his waist for the United States Championship when he thinks RVD isn't looking, but Rob sees this and this pisses him off. He says, "Forget it, Kidman," storms up the ramp and the cameras follow him through the curtain. He demands to know where Kanyon is, but Shane McMahon stops him from proceeding any further. Shane tells RVD that he's got Kanyon next week. There's going to be no excuses, no changes. If both men are in the building, then he will make that match happen. Rob Van Dam tells Shane he's going to kick Canyon's teeth down his throat, but if he has to wait one more week, then he's willing to do that to get his hands on him in the middle of the ring. So this is a really good segment, particularly with Shane and RVD's involvement, getting a 79, gaining heat to the Generation of Innovation storyline, and we will finally see Rob Van Dam and Kanyon in the ring together next week. Now, it's still a decent rating. I mean, a match that is outside of the pre-show between workers there's no interest in is still doing better than the vast majority of the matches with people who are supposed to be like well-known or recognisable. So it shows that talent does overcome lack of interest in a way, and it's not too far off the actual ratings of these guys, but it's a triple threat match that opens up the second 45 minutes of the show. It's a triple threat match that opens up the second half of the show. It goes 6 minutes and 55. I did want to give this, I think, 8 minutes to start with, but we were over on the ratios for match angles, so I did knock a minute off this. But Super Crazy defeats Elix Skipper and Jimmy Yang with his moonsault that he does, the first rope, the second rope, the third rope. The match was, of course, designed to revolve around high spots, and all 3 men get middling performances. This is a number 1 contendership match, so there's going to be 1 3-way this week, 1 3-way next week, and the 2 winners of those 3 ways will go into a future 3-way match with Sugar Shane Helms, the first title defense that we'll be seeing from Sugar Shane since he defeated Chavo and Billy Kidman on those 2 early shows. Now, Super Crazy is the first guy through, so if you have any predictions of who the second guy through might be, that's for you to work out. But we cut to the back after that match, and Sugar Shane is shown speaking with Shane McMahon. Something I've tried to do, we do want to show that Shane has a lot of time and a lot of respect for his champions. I suppose the Lance Storm one he's had a lot of interactions with as well, and it's about the fact that Shane's taking input from these guys, and they're just waxing lyrical about the match we've just seen. What we want them to do is to put over these young guys, because a 58 segment that's talking about Super Crazy, fingers crossed that does help get him more over. I genuinely don't know the mechanics, to be fair. This is what the Cruiserweight division is all about, and Shane confirms another 3-way next week. As I said, the other winner will face Helms at a future date as well. Helms is more than happy to face this challenge. Walking into the office, a guy we haven't seen since the Big Bang and his first Nitro appearance of this save, David Flair, asks Shane McMahon if he can give him time to talk on next week's show. McMahon looks at the papers on his desk and says he's not sure that he's going to find time for it, to be fair. David Flair begs Shane to just give him a couple of minutes to say what he has to say, and Shane tells the returning guy that he'll do what he can. We've not seen him since he was put through a table by Mike Awesome, so is it the case that he's going to address the Canadian Killer next week, or is there something else on the mind of Ric Flair's child? Buff Bagwell is then interviewed in the back. The Harris twins stood looking intimidating, hopefully, in a pretty crap segment again. While Buff puts over the 2 men and his own victory earlier, they are cut off by DDP, who is absolutely furious. He is pissed off at the 2 men for costing him the number 1 contendership last week, well, all 3 of the men, and he says that the Harris brothers look like a pair of shaven testicles, or whatever verbiage DDP would use, and that must make Buff the prick hanging between them. This causes the Harris brothers to go after Diamond Dallas Page, but Booker T, his partner tonight, quickly arrives on the scene as backup. The numbers advantage does allow Buff to get in a couple of cheap shots before he decides to lead the Harris brothers away. They don't need to get involved in this right now. They're going to sort them out in the ring tonight, and it's just, yeah, when I'm talking about how bad things are going or certain storylines not reaching the potential, I thought, who in this scenario of rebuilding WCW would have thought what we need to do is put Don and Ron Harris in the World Heavyweight title storyline? I know like times are hard and we've got to plug people into the gaps where maybe we wouldn't put them because other people would be available, but I'm putting Don and Ron Harris in the main event storyline and then complaining that our ratings aren't that good. Yeah, just a bit of self-reflection there. Shawn Stasiak gets injured here. That's the first thing that I know. I will talk first to the match, which is 5 minutes and 35, a weapons match, and it's basically Jindrak and Stasiak do their best. They can brawl, they're good fighters. We're not trying to put them down as anything weak, but ultimately they are not as well versed in hardcore wrestling as the quote-unquote extreme outsiders. Everybody, sort of the commentators and the company, are referring to Tommy Dreamer and Hack as the extreme outsiders, but as we put across during the match, we don't really know the motive of these two guys yet. They haven't spoke, they haven't explained themselves in any way, neither has Francine. Again, there is a catfight between Francine and Stacy Keibler on the outside, which I'm sure Jerry Lawler briefly enjoys before realising that he hates these extreme people, but it is Hack who pins Shawn Stasiak with a senton bomb. I'm happy to see Shawn taking the pinfall there if he has sustained an injury that will keep him out long term or even short term, but I will see in the post show what that is. There's no heat on anybody, so it must have just been one of those things. I suppose there's a risk in a hardcore match that may happen. Hardcore Hack and Tommy Dreamer are then joined by Francine, fresh from that catfight, standing tall in the ring, holding their weapons. Dreamer has a chair, Hack has a cane. The commentators put over that Shane McMahon has confirmed that next week, one of these two men, whichever one of them chooses, will face Hugh Morrus in a match where anything goes. The group then leave back through the crowd, with all three of them casting a glance towards Jerry Lawler, who played a role in this match being made, if you remember, on the King's Court last week, and has been very outspoken against the trio. Hack points his cane towards Lawler as they walk past. Just the first acknowledgement there that these guys are aware of the things that Jerry Lawler has been saying, and it seems like he has caught their attention. Back in Shane's office, Lance Storm confronts the man in charge. Both he and Mike Awesome are furious about what happened earlier tonight. He demands the result is stricken from the record. That match never happened. Shane says that he needs to head to the ring soon. He's got something he needs to say. You know, payback's a bitch is basically his message to Team Canada. Next week, however, he's going to make sure that the match he's booking is completely fair because everybody is barred from ringside. Mike Awesome, Rovam Dam, Chris Kanyon, Johnny the Bull, because Lance Storm will be defending his United States Championship against Billy Kidman. The two men are absolutely furious about this, with Mike even looking like he might get physical with Shane, but Shane's not backing down from anybody. Lance has to calm the Canadian killer and says, really, that's not going to be the best thing for our careers if you knock out the boss. But Shane heads out the office because he has something to say in the ring, leaving Lance and Mike to stew. They're going to have to come up with something in the next 7 days. Shane makes his entrance, as we said. He's hyping up the crowd for the rest of the show, asking how they feel about the first few weeks of WCW since the return. A sort of generic few minutes there, just trying to gauge fan reaction, essentially. Shane then turns attention to his announcement, saying that with all the new blood coming into WCW, it's taking this company to another level. That's not true. Well, I suppose going down is another level, but he's announcing that we want to showcase that with another special episode of Nitro 3 weeks from tonight, so it does give us time to build up matches to that show, and hopefully we'll see a spike in the viewership for that. Unfortunately, I can't pre-book anything like multiple weeks in advance, I don't think. I will check if you can do that, but I don't think you can. It'd be nice if you could pre-book it, but for a specific date, so I could pre-book it for the 8th of August or whatever it is. I can't do that, but hopefully the matches that we put on will have that effect anyway, because all championships will be defended on that show, including Booker T versus Buff Bagwell, that's already confirmed, of course, the World Heavyweight Championship match at WCW Nitro New Blood Rising. McMahon also teases that there may be new blood showing up between now and then, and encourages the fans to tune in every week. You never know who might show up, so just a generically vague hype job from Shane McMahon there at the end, but also the main crux. We have got another special episode coming up, and I'm going to keep doing around one a month, I think, until we get to Starrcade. We've definitely got the big Halloween Havoc show that also falls on a Wednesday, the 31st of October, so I really like that, as did July the 4th. So a couple of serendipitous things that I think will make for really good shows, but Halloween Havoc in particular I'm going to build as a probably the biggest episode of Nitro of the year. WCW World Heavyweight Championship storyline advances and gains heat here. Shane McMahon, brilliant. just green notes all around, apart from the commentary, which I suppose is fair enough. I thought that having Jerry Lawler and Mike Tenay, we wouldn't have that problem because they're so good, but it probably just shows how impressive of a promo Shane McMahon cut, essentially, and a 75, probably the first segment on the night that I'm truly happy with the rating of. We then get a vignette featuring Chavo Guerrero with the member of the legendary Guerrero family, watching back footage featuring members of his family, looking at old photos in his family home. The vignette puts over that Chavo Guerrero is at a bit of a crossroads in his career. Where does he go next and what is he coming back for? So just a bit of reflection from him as he works on building up some muscle mass and coming back to probably the United States Championship division or that level. Booker T makes his entrance before the main event, but he's jumped from behind by the Harris brothers, who look to get the upper hand before the match. Now, this is going to be a pretty short main event, and it's going to be a bad main event. I can't reiterate how stupid I feel about something that I've just booked within the last couple of days. Ron and Don Harris are main event in Nitro, and it's going to be terrible. Anyway, quickly running out to even the odds, Diamond Dallas Page helps Booker T fight back, but it takes a couple of minutes for the brawl to get under control. The reason for this, again, I needed to cut minutes off matches, so we just thought, have them fight for a couple of minutes before the match. It means that some damage is done, we can get straight into the action in the main event, and the creative finish was a success. I dread to think how bad this would have been if it hadn't have been a success. It's basically just what I said in it. 36 from Ron Harris, 40 from Don Harris. Remind me not to use these again. The contract's running out in a few days, but I mean, what did I expect? Diamond Dallas Page gets the pin on Don Harris with a diamond cutter. Booker T and Diamond Dallas Page work well together, and he's head and shoulders above everybody else. I needed a main event, and I thought putting our two big stars in there would carry the match to maybe at least like a 60, and then the segments would get us up to the 65 that we need. DDP with a 68 really is worrying me, but it is a win for him, and it is a dominant win for both of them, so I'm hoping that that does some good things for his momentum and whatnot. After the match, another not so great segment, but we do at least get some of the heat back to the storyline. Buff attempts to sneak attack Booker T, but he's stopped in his tracks by Diamond Dallas Page. It's a very poorly thought out scheme by Buff Bagwell, and he is basically delivered to the champion for a bookend. Buff then staggers back to his feet and straight into a diamond cutter. Booker T and DDP seem to have put their differences aside. As we said, they both hit each other with their finishers and drew a line under it, so that's what you want to see from two babyfaces, I suppose. They laugh as Buff dramatically rolls out of the ring, obviously in severe pain. He looks to the Harris brothers on the outside to help him back to his feet, but they shake their heads at him and walk off, and you'll be happy to know that is the end of the Ron and Don Harris experiment. Again, they've been paid by Buff, but now that job's done, they want nothing to do with him. As the winners of the main event continue to celebrate, the humiliated Buff Bagwell crawls to the top of the ramp on his hands and knees, and even the commentators are kind of taking the mick out of him here. He's been laughed at by Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Hare, by Shane McMahon, his boss, and he's just snapped. He grabs a microphone and throws a full-on tantrum while sat on the ground. He then stands up and gets a little bit more fire in his belly. We want to see some seriousness from Buff Bagwell that you don't often see. He stands up and vows that nobody will be laughing at him. He is the new blood rising in WCW, and when he leaves that show as the World Heavyweight Champion, he will be the only one with a smile on his face. Despite saying this, DDP and Booker T in the ring are basically cracking up at it, so it's the juxtaposition of Buff trying to be as serious and as fired up and as legitimate as he possibly can, and the two guys in the ring are just laughing at him. Again, sounds like a burial, part of a long-term plan, and frankly, you're just going to have to believe me on that matter, despite the fact that it seems like I haven't got a bloody clue what I'm doing. Losing heat in 9 regions, gaining heat in 1 region, that's the story of this save so far, but yeah, just not good. And it's just occurred to me that I'm going to be in trouble with a network. A 30-day injury for Shawn Stasiak, so I think he'll be back for the next time that I needed him in an in-ring segment. If not, we can sub somebody in. He can work angles still, which is cool, and I might try and work this into him being a bit of a coward, a bit of a softie, and Matt Jindrak having to maybe wheel him about the backstage area in a wheelchair. Who knows, but that's 30 days that we don't have Shawn Stasiak. Making a little bit of money again there. Oh no, I didn't want to read that. I don't know why I even looked at that. But there it is. WCW Nitro done for another week. Psicosis goes after his 1 match. The USA Network are unhappy. I'm going to actually keep that email so that I can remember that I'm on my first strike of 3. Shawn Stasiak out for a month. I don't need to keep that. And the viewing figures, yeah, I need to do better. But that's the other thing I was going to point out earlier. I don't think people are gaining popularity. Now, Booker may have gained 1. Shane's exactly where he was. But there's going to be a few people. I'll go through the roster and just kind of... Still no stars, I forgot about that. I was expecting to see Diamond Dallas Page's face there. So, since the start, Buff has actually gained popularity. So, so Buff has gained popularity. DDP's lost 2, but I remember most of that came at the Big Bang, to be fair. But here's one. Lance Storm, 53, 52 he's on now, and that's not because he lost the match. He was down to that before Billy Kidman pinned him. So we got him up to a 57, presumably with the 2 big wins or the 3 big wins that he got in the build to becoming the United States champion. But how quickly he loses it. I mean, May to June, I suppose, was because we didn't book a show maybe, or we only booked 1 show, but he's lost popularity from the start of the save there. So that means the Big Bang cost him popularity, and then he gained popularity through June with us just having 1 Nitro where he won the belt, I suppose, in the main event. What am I doing wrong, I suppose, is my question. Is it because he's being booked in angles that aren't rating particularly well, or is it something else? Billy Kidman has gone up, so I suppose you could explain that away with that. But like Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire, I know they've been in bad matches, so that's my question basically, isn't it? Does the quality of what you put them in affect their popularity more than them winning matches? Because they've won 4 matches, they've won 4 squash matches, but 3 of them have been really, really bad matches. So is that more important? Is the quality of the show more important than the strength of the booking, if you know what I mean? Again, Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo, my understanding is that these guys shouldn't have lost any popularity. Hugh Morrus, somebody who I don't think I've booked that well, has gone up. So it's almost like I don't know what I'm doing. And if anybody can explain what I'm doing right or wrong, I'd really appreciate it. Van Damme's going up at least, but that's just going to happen because he's absolutely fantastic, isn't it? Dreamer's losing popularity. Vader has lost popularity since coming in from 3 squash matches, and he's lost like a decent amount of his popularity just by being in 3 squash matches that he won on WCW TV. So is it people going, oh, we've seen him, actually, he's not as good as we thought? Is someone like Super Crazy gaining popularity? So Super Crazy is, obviously, what we're desperate for is for some of these unimportant people to be dragged up to the next level, but I don't think any of them have been booked in a way that would actually put them anywhere near it. So Devon Storm has gone down. Johnny the Bull stayed exactly where he was. So yeah, am I just being impatient? It probably is the case that I'm just being impatient, isn't it? But I suppose we just carry on trying to do what we're doing and hope things work out for the best in the long run. We still have Diamond Dallas Page in the Who's Not, but we have managed to get Buff into somewhat of a positive, or at least neutral in his momentum. He's actually got warm momentum, so that's very good to see. Do we have any like character ideas that we can maybe try on? I mean, he says it's a big gamble, so I could really upset him. Do we take the risk? Do we take the risk? Do we take the risk? No is the answer. I'm not going to do that. Yeah, just a case of booking him better, I think, and sort of keeping in mind, I've actually got next week's show up here, and I don't actually have Booker T booked, which says a lot. I do just want to make a couple of signings before we go off, and then I can sort of, into the next episode, hopefully just get straight into stuff and have a shorter thing at the start. If I do the signings now, stick them on the end of this episode. So we're bringing in Shark Boy, and might look like a step back for the booking of Vader, but he's just going to squash Shark Boy next week just to give him another win. $60. That is Shark Boy in for a one-off appearance. And then the other guys that I'm going to bring in are another set of former tag team champions. Now, I suppose I've recognised that like the booking of Natural Born Thrillers is actually sending them backwards, but am I just going to carry on and see if it changes, or do I course correct now? You see, him and Johnny Grunge are former tag team champions, so I'll bring them in because worst case scenario, we can just use them in a pre-show thing and give them a tryout. Not that I ever see these two likely being a member of our full-time roster, but it's worth giving him a go, isn't it? We don't want to cover his travel if possible. Johnny Grunge is the other one that we'll go for. So Johnny Grunge being brought in on a one-night deal as well per show. They wrestled in, was it XWF or WWE? I can't remember which one it was. I very much get those two companies mixed up, but they had Jasmine St. Clair as their manager, and I've watched these shows, and that's why I didn't feel too bad about putting like the Nasty Boys in a match losing, because I watched a show where they lost the Shane twins in like 3 minutes. So it's not out of the realms of possibility. If they're willing to do that on those shows, that they'll do it on these. And then again, Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge likewise, probably not making too many bookings at the minute, so to get, even if it is only $90 from WCW, it's something for them. But yeah, that's the end of this episode. We do have some really good matches, but we've got a title match, we've got Rob Van Dam v Kanyon, we've got Hack v Hugh Morrus. For what I might do, obviously we want every video to have its own interesting USP, so this has been the How I Book, although I did abandon it quite soon into the video. I'm thinking I might just do a double header for the next one and try and advance the series a little bit quicker. Then the episode after that can be the special New Blood Rising show, so just keeping things ticking over nicely rather than just making it one episode a week. Try and vary it up, and hopefully people are enjoying the format that we're doing here. I'm basically not doing anything off screen, so all the signs I make, all the screens that I look at, I may cut some boring things out, but I'm pretty much recording every second of me playing TW9 up to this point, so hopefully you're enjoying that and it's not something that maybe makes the videos too long. Again, putting the chapters in should help if people just want to see the shows and don't want spoilers for future signings or whatever. But with all that waffling done, I will thank you for watching, and next week's show will open up with Billy Kidman versus Lance Storm for the United States Championship, so hopefully you will join me for that, and thank you for watching, of course, as always.